watching the Mystical Green Beanie.
Hey, what's going on, dudes and dudettes? I am the Mystical Green Beanie, and welcome to my best of, worst of, spoiler-filled review for Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, for those of you who don't know, I've already done a video with that other review dude where we discussed the movie immediately after watching it, but I wanted to do this video because by now, I've had some time to think about the film more and really solidify my feelings towards it. So without further delay, let's get into it. And as always, starting off with my positives, let's talk about the best of. And the first thing on this list is Tom Holland as Peter Parker. Now, I love Andrew Garfield. Before watching this movie, he was my favorite live-action Peter Parker, but I like Tom Holland a little better. I love the way he sounds, I love the way he carries himself in and out of the costume, and while I do still see Andrew Garfield as the older, looser Peter Parker from the Jerry Conway era, Tom Holland nails the Brian Bendis Ultimate Universe Peter Parker that I grew up reading. And speaking of which, everyone in this movie gives a wonderful performance. Even the cast members who I was kind of lukewarm on, like Laura Harrier, completely blew me away. Same with Jacob Batalon. I think this was his first film, and he killed it as Gank. And yeah, I know he's technically playing Ned Leeds, but he's Gank. But yeah, all the performances were great, but I gotta say, my favorite has to be from Michael Keaton. Originally, I wasn't too keen on him playing the Vulture, but after watching the movie and seeing his performance, he's perfect. And this is probably one of my favorite roles of his. I also love the script, because even though I have some personal fanboyish problems with the movie, and the liberties that it takes with the mythology, I still feel like the writers of this film have an affinity for this material and this character, and have crafted a wonderful greatest hits tribute to Spider-Man. And I can't put into words just how much I appreciated that as a Spider-Man fan, but beyond that, I'm just glad that this movie makes sense narrative-wise, because a big problem with the previous 5 Spider-Man films is that those movies are very poorly written. Even the ones that I like suffer from major script issues where character motivations are often thin and there's information that's not relayed properly and such. And it was so refreshing to have a Spider-Man movie that actually made sense from scene to scene. I should also comment on how beautiful this movie looks. John Watts did a fantastic job directing this film. This is a very beautiful looking film. The tone is exactly what a high school Spider-Man movie should be. It's fun when it needs to be fun, but gritty when it needs to be gritty, and it handles that balance masterfully in my opinion. This is also a very unique Marvel film. It doesn't feel like a generic Marvel movie. It has its own style, it has its own identity, and it really worked for that character. Another thing that I love about this movie is how it shows that the cultural consciousness of this world has shifted. And even though it looks similar to our world, it's not. Because due to the existence of the Avengers and killer robots and aliens and whatnot, people see the world differently. And I really appreciated that because that's something that I picked up on in the Ultimate Universe, and I'm really glad that the movie introduces that element to the MCU. Finally, let's talk about the villain. Because the Vulture is probably, and by probably I mean definitely, one of, if not my favorite MCU villains so far. He's sympathetic, he has an ideology that I can not only understand but really get behind, and the movie does a great job of reinventing this character while not completely bastardizing him as we've seen in previous Spider-Man films. And while I'm at it, I love how this movie intimately ties the villain to Peter's civilian life, and while I have heard some people complain about that, I don't mind it. Because that's a really old school Stan Lee thing to do, and I really appreciated that. But yeah, those were my biggest positives of the film, but let's move on to some of the things that I didn't like so much. So let's talk about my negatives, let's talk about the worst of. And starting this list off is the suit. Now aesthetically, I've come to appreciate it, especially after seeing what the costume in Spider-Man PS4 looks like, but it's still too busy for my taste, but more importantly, it's too high-tech. And personally, I don't mind Peter using gadgets, because he does in the comics all the time. A huge staple of that character is that he builds weird gadgets and technology to help him save the day. But the key words in that sentence are, he builds. And in this movie, he's kinda given all of this stuff, and I really resist Peter being so tech heavy and not actually building any of the tech that he's using. Now, as I've said before, I'm not a huge fan of Gank being in this movie, and even though he's technically credited as Ned Leeds, he's Gank. And I don't like Peter having a character who's essentially Gank as a best friend, because Gank is a Miles Morales supporting character, not a Peter Parker supporting character. And what makes that creative choice worse is that the movie establishes that a version of Miles already exists in this universe. So that just feels like a really dumb decision to me. But what makes it worse is that MJ exists in this universe as well, and she feels a lot more like Ultimate MJ than she does Classic MJ. And it hit me while I was watching this movie a second time around that it would have made more sense to have MJ be Peter's confidant and not that weird Gank Ned Leeds hybrid character, and you still could have told a similar story with her trying to hook Peter up with Liz, while also building a complicated love triangle between the three of them. And it would have worked just fine, while also giving MJ more of a character arc than just the weird girl who's obsessed with Peter, who finally tells him her name at the end of the movie. And I stick to the argument that I made in the discussion that I had with that other review dude, where I say, if you're gonna do Ultimate MJ, then do Ultimate MJ. Don't dance around it. Another thing that I didn't like in this movie is Flash Thompson, because this guy is not Flash Thompson. Flash is a jock. He's a bully that intimidates people physically. And even though Tony Revolori gives a great and funny performance, he's not Flash. I'm sorry, but that's just not who that character is. I'm also not a fan of how bad Peter is at approaching criminals, and the excuse that people have for this is that he's inexperienced, he's young, he's an amateur, and that would be fine if I hadn't already read Ultimate Spider-Man and watched Spectacular Spider-Man, because there, we see a Spider-Man who's 15 or 16 sneaking up on criminals and using his anonymity to his advantage. So seeing him go about things like a simple interrogation like a rank amateur really threw me off. And finally, this is just one of those minor fanboy things, but I don't like Hot Aunt May. I know everyone tried to make her look older and slightly more dorky, but it didn't work. She's still hot, and that bothers me, and you can take that phrasing however you'd like. But with all that said, I really like this movie. It's not my favorite Spider-Man adaptation, that title still goes to the Spectacular Spider-Man TV series, but this is for sure my favorite live-action Spider-Man film, with The Amazing Spider-Man 2 coming in behind it, and The Amazing Spider-Man coming in at a close third, and the other three just kind of existing because I don't like them. But yeah, those are my thoughts, but what about you? What were your thoughts on this film? Let me know down below in the comment section. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button, share, support the channel, and if you want to see more content like this, all you have to do is subscribe. I'm the Mystical Green Beanie, thank you for watching, and as always, until next time, adios nachos, adios.